city, livable city year project. Um, they have, I've learned a lot just working with them. So it's been a huge privilege for me. So I'll let them introduce themselves.
Jennifer?
Hi, I'm Jennifer. I am also graduating this quarter. I'm going to be getting a degree in community development and planning, and I just finished my certificate doing GIS. And when you can't find me behind a computer screen doing GIS, I'm probably in the local community garden where I work. That's a little about me.
Rachel?
All right. Hi, my name is Rachel. I'm doing pretty much the same educational route as Jennifer. I'm also an urban studies major, about to graduate, and just did my GIS certificate. Yeah, I'm about to move to a new city after I graduate, so.
Cameron?
Hello, my name is Cameron. I have 2 quarters left at UW-Tacoma. I'm also getting my degree in urban studies. I just finished the Geospatial Information System certificate. I think that's the right name. It might be geo something else. I don't know. I learned the things, not the words.
And Omar?
Hi, I'm Omar. I'm in my 3rd year at UW-Tacoma, and my major is urban studies, community development, and planning. And I'm interested in both urban planning and transportation planning.
Mayor Sue?
Hello, I'm the mayor of the city of Long Beach and very interested in the infill housing and how we will meet the requirements in the future.
Staying in Long Beach, how about Dave?
David Glass, the city administrator for Long Beach.
And Ariel, I see you're with us.
I am. I'm Ariel Smith. I'm the city planner for Long Beach.
Moving a little bit south, Holly, thank you for joining.
She's distracted. We'll come back.
And Jovan from up north.
Hi, everyone. Sorry I was off camera for just a second. Really excited to be here. I'm the executive director of the Willop Arbor Chamber of Commerce and city council for the city of Raymond. So this project's near and dear to my heart, looking at the future of our community. And I'm super excited to see the report. So, thanks.
Darian from the county.
Hi all, this is Darian Sheldon from Pacific County Health, and I manage our housing programs and do our 5-year homeless housing plan.
And moving regionally, we have Jennifer Westerman with us. Thank you for joining, Jennifer.
Hey Kelly, hi everybody. Jennifer Westerman. I'm the CEO of Housing Opportunities of Southwest Washington and Executive Director of Joint Pacific County Housing Authority, and just back from vacation, a little lagged.
But Jennifer will be eager to hire all of you graduates here. So so make sure your resumes are sent in the chat to Jennifer. There you go. Ralph.
I'm a new elected councilman for the city of Long Beach, so I'm here for informational.
Hey Ralph, thank you for joining. And we have a Motorola Moto G Play.
Yeah, that's Mark Perez probably.
Hi, Mark.
I'm on the City Council, Long Beach.
Thank you for joining.
Okay.
And of course, TTR from Livable Cities.
Hi, everyone. Terry Randall, Program Manager for Livable City Year at the University of Washington.
Very good. Thanks, everyone, for joining. So, Gareth, I'll turn it over to you and the team. You have permission to share.
All right. You guys are up. I'm not sure who's going to take the lead, but I'll let you guys go. Cameron, are you going to start?
Yep. I was just. I think you can see my screen.
Yep.
I have like Zoom happening and Canvas slides. I'm like, what's going on? There's pop-ups everywhere. Okay, so we're the Pacific County Infill Housing Opportunities Group. We just introduced ourselves, so I'm going to skip through those pages. because we already talked about ourselves. Our task at hand. I'll let you start, Omar.
All right. For this slide, I'll be discussing our task in this project. An issue that Pacific County is facing right now is that current population growth projections for 2044 do not align with the housing stock quantities that we're seeing on the ground. The previous Pacific County LCY groups identified vacant and underutilized parcels. They conducted a land capacity analysis study. And then finally, they drafted some generalized infill zoning recommendations for each incorporated municipality within Pacific County. What we're doing here for this project is we're building upon this previous student group's work to identify barriers to potential infill middle housing which exist within the municipal code of Pacific County's incorporated municipalities. And this has been mapped for South Bend, Raymond, and Long Beach. We've also identified zoning change recommendations which would better allow municipalities to adequately plan for housing growth towards these goals under new housing bills.
Okay, so on this slide, we're going to be introducing the concept of middle housing. So Washington state law defines middle housing as buildings that are compatible in scale, form, and character with single-family houses, but which have more dwelling units inside of them. So they are situated right in the middle of this scale between the detached single-family homes on the left and mid-rise on the far right. So these are the housing types we have kept in mind in trying to think of zoning recommendations that would promote opportunities to have these housing types within your municipalities. Next, we are talking about why reduce barriers to middle housing. So some of these benefits include a more diverse housing stock and a range of choices for residents, which would invite a more diverse set of residents and to support more people living within the municipalities. Infill housing is also beneficial for economic growth of the city. Having more people living within the city limits contributes to the neighborhood cohesion and local economy. And additionally, infill development, rather than expanding the footprint of the city, is looking within the city limits. So creating more density where land is already developed. So it's a very sustainable form of development.
All right. So I'll get into a little bit more context around the Washington state legislation, which adds to why we're talking about middle housing and infill housing in Pacific County. And these House bills are also some things that we'll go into a little bit more detail in our report as well. So first, I'll talk about House Bill 1220, which was an amendment to the Growth Management Act in 2021, and it changed the way that communities are required to plan for housing. So it was amended to plan for and accommodate housing affordable to all income levels, which is significantly enhanced the previous goal of simply encouraging affordable housing. It also gives the Washington Office of Financial Management the responsibility to allocate population and housing growth projections for each county that plans under the Growth Management Act. And then I'll go into these projections in the next slide. For House Bill 1337, this is a more recent bill passed in 2023 that actually requires all local governments planning under the Growth Management Act to allow at least 2 ADUs per lot within urban growth areas with some limitations. So it's a kind of a big bill for a lot of municipalities that plan under the GMA. And then some more guidance and resources will be in our report as well. But some of the more details around that include that the municipalities cannot set a minimum ADU size of less than 1,000 square feet. Some of this does also depend on stuff like environmental constraints and stuff like that. There's also They also must allow a variety of ADU types, including attached ADUs, detached, or in existing structures such as garages. And municipalities cannot require the ADUs or the primary dwelling to be owner occupied. But that does not restrict municipalities from allowing, that doesn't mean that they can't restrict short-term rentals, like vacation rentals. So yeah, so that's for that one. And then for House Bill 1110, this one does not, from what we can see, it does not apply to Pacific County and the municipalities, but it might be something good to model some of the middle housing changes after if you choose to go in that direction. So it was enacted in 2023 and it requires 77 communities to revise their zoning codes to allow middle housing buildings of 2 to 6 units per lot in residential neighborhoods. And that's in addition to the ADUs. All right. So then I'll go into the Housing for All planning tool, which is the tool that informs municipalities and counties about what kind of housing growth they have to plan for under House Bill 1220. So the only number that came directly from the Housing for All planning tool is the number at the bottom right of 1,400. So that is the total number of housing units that is projected to be needed in 2044 for Pacific County as a whole. We have done our own little breakdown of how this total number might be allocated, but ultimately it is up to the county and the municipalities to work together to decide how they want to allocate these housing numbers and plan for them under the House bill. But so the breakdown that we have here is based off of population growth projections that we found in the Pacific County Comprehensive Plan of 2021. So for example, Ilwaco in this plan was projected to have about 21% of the county's total population growth. So then we took that 20.9% and we said, okay, so we'll give about 21% of the housing units needed to Ilwaco, just to kind of mirror the population growth projections. And then so also something to note is that the county and municipalities can also choose to plan for lower level population projections. So what I'm showing here is medium level projections, and HAPT also provides low and high. So these are right in the middle. Yeah. All right, and then we'll go to the next section for middle housing types.
Middle housing types. This section of the slideshow was presented by the models, or these are models of housing types from the Washington State Department of Commerce. We have the duplex, which is a small middle housing type. These are usually detached house scale building consisting of 2 side-by-side units, which both face the street and are contained within a single building. They're usually 2.5 stories tall in height. And these are the different dimensions of them. The dimensions aren't really important for this part, but they will be important later. We have cottage housing, which is usually a group of 6 or so homes, all on one lot. They are smaller buildings and are typically 1.5 stories tall and are arranged in this sort of style to allow for like an inner courtyard. We have triplexes, which are 3 units side by side in a house scaled building, but sometimes on the upper echelon of house size. These are 2.5 stories tall usually, so still within the Pacific County height limit. We have fourplexes, which are just 4 housing units in a larger building. These also fit the 2.5 size height requirements, usually 2.5 stories. And they're usually either 2 on an upper floor and 2 on a lower floor. Is just how these are often laid out. We have 5plexes, which are a medium to large sized detached house consisting of 5 units within a single building. They are usually under 2.5 stories in height, And most have like one entrance or two entrances, often facing the street. Sixplexes have 6 units and are a small to medium styled house. Also under that 2.5 stories in height. We have courtyard housing, and this is where it changes up a little bit. They have like a detached style, or they have these large styles on the right. The large style on the right is called Courtyard Housing 3. And it's actually not an option for Pacific County. It's too tall from the height limits based on the environmental concerns of like the ground shifting and moving. This 3-story building is not an option really. But I guess if environmental concerns were to change or zoning was to change for some of these areas, then this could be an option. As I know, Kelly and I discussed how there's the tall hotels in Long Beach, which are over the size limits of other zones. And our last type is townhouses, which are a medium to large middle housing type, consisting of multiple units. And it can range from like 3 to 5 to 6. This one on the right is 2 buildings technically on one parcel, and each building has 3 units inside of it. We are now going to go into our municipal recommendations, and we're going to start with Ilwaco.
All right, thank you, Cameron. Today, I will be going over the proposed zoning change recommendations for Ilwaco. Next slide. All right. Firstly, let's take a brief look at some of the current zoning guidelines in Ilwaco, which affect infill housing implementation. In the R1 zoning district, we have a minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet. In the R2 zoning district, we have a minimum lot size of 7,000 square feet for duplexes. We also have a minimum lot size of 6,000 square feet for multifamily dwellings, plus an additional 1,000 square feet for each additional ground floor dwelling unit, and an additional 500 square feet for each additional dwelling unit above ground level. For front side setback standards, the R1 and R2 zoning districts both have a minimum front side setback length of 15 feet. All right, next slide. Moving on to the recommended changes. We'll start off with the R1 zoning district, where I propose that the minimum lot size be decreased from 5,000 square feet to 4,500 square feet in order to allow for an increased housing capacity. In the R2 zoning district, I propose that the minimum lot size for duplexes be decreased from 7,000 to 6,000 square feet. I also propose that the base minimum lot size for multifamily dwellings be decreased from 6,000 to 5,000 square feet. I also recommend that the additional lot size minimum increase for additional ground floor dwelling units be decreased from 1,000 to 500 square feet. And finally, I recommend that the front side setback minimum be reduced from 15 to 10 feet. All these changes will allow for an increased amount of infill housing to be implemented in Ilwaco, while also taking into consideration concerns about neighborhood character, primarily within the R1 zoning district. All right.
You're now going to go over to Raymond.
All right, I'll get into the state of Raymond. So I'll start off with some of the current zoning information as well as the other status of housing and parcels in Raymond. So Raymond has been a little bit more leeway in comparison to some of the other municipalities in terms of their density. So in their most recent comprehensive plan, they made a goal to allow duplexes on lots of 6,000 square feet, which is down from, I believe it was either 7,500 or 7,000. And they also made a goal to allow multifamily on parcels of 10,000 square feet or larger. Also looking at some of the parcels that could potentially have infill housing. In taking into account areas that have sewer, I was able to find about 86 residential vacant parcels based on the data that I added, as well as the parcels from the previous group's analysis. I found that sewer is not extended throughout the entirety of Raymond and the urban growth area. So there are some areas that if sewer was able to be extended to, there could potentially be more housing allowed. And then according to the updated HAP numbers from the previous slides, Raymond may need approximately 181 homes by 2044. So I'm just going to look at, on the next slide, I'm going to look at some of the sewer in Raymond. So this is in the central area. Forgive me, I don't know all the neighborhood names. So sewer appears to be spread out pretty well throughout this area. And then through the next slide, I have the northern area north of the river. And sewer is in, I'd say, about half of it, but it could be extended further to allow building on more of the parcels. The red outlines are the platted out parcels that are part of the urban growth area. And then on the next slide, I'm showing more areas that are similar. And sorry if it wasn't clear, the light blue is the sewer lines. All right, next slide. Same thing. Okay. And then I'll get into the next section of Raymond. All right. So next I looked at some of the vacant parcels that are connected to sewer or are close to the main sewer lines. So this is the central area of Raymond, and these are all parcels that I found to be within about 40 feet of sewer. So that's in that area. And then also I coded it by the size of the parcel. So the yellow is about 6,000 feet or under. The orange is 6,000 feet or over. And then red is up to 10,000 feet. And the next slide is the northern area again. So there's a handful of parcels in each area. Next slide, please. And looking at the same thing in another area. And the next slide. And this is the southeast part of Raymond. So there's a few less available parcels, but still some there. Okay, next slide. All right. So for part of my analysis, I just looked at a handful of parcels in Raymond to give some examples of what could potentially fit if the minimum lot sizes for multifamily homes were lowered a little bit. So for example, based on the example of middle housing measurements that we found earlier in the presentation, I found that some of these like triplexes and fourplexes could potentially fit on some of these parcels. So for example, on the left here, I have the purple parcel and the number there is the square footage. So it's about 6,600 square feet, which is under what they would want to do currently, it would be allowed to have a single family home or a duplex. But based on the measurements of the triplex and fourplex examples, I found that they could fit on that parcel. And that's including side setbacks and roughly the front and rear setbacks as well. And then on the parcel to the right, which is about 8,000 square feet, I found that you could fit up to a fourplex or even a townhouse if desired. Okay, next slide. All right, and this is in the northern area. I was looking at just one parcel over here that was about 8,000 square feet. And I found that it could fit a variety of sizes. So the 2 types of triplexes and then a few different types of fourplexes. All right, and then, so this is in the southwest area of Raymond. So these 2 smaller parcels, which are again about the size of what would fit a single family home or a duplex, could also fit triplexes or even fourplexes as well. All right, and then I'll get into some of my recommendations that I'm making, and I'll I will also get a little bit more detailed in my report, but so for zoning, I would recommend to explore allowing triplexes and possibly even fourplexes on parcels that are less than 10,000 square feet, as long as setbacks and height requirements are met. For setbacks, looking at some of the other municipalities in the county, I believe it was Long Beach and Ilwaco, you could reduce the front setback from what's currently 20 square feet to about 10 or 15 square feet to match some of the other municipalities and allow potentially a little bit more building area on there. And similarly, you could explore reducing the rear setbacks as well. Also, which will be required by House Bill 1337, I would recommend starting to look into updating the ordinances in Raymond to allowing up to 2 ADUs per lot. And then also looking into how you can extend utilities and roads and that sort of thing in order to allow and accommodate more housing in further areas of Raymond. So there's the CHIP grant, which is detailed on the Office of Financial Management website. It assists with utilities connection or covers the cost of connection fees, primarily for affordable housing developments and infill housing. And some of the conditions are setting up a sales and use tax for affordable housing, which could potentially also help go into a fund for building affordable housing as well, and have more housing in general. And this program also offers waivers for connection fees for affordable and infill housing. Let's see. And so a little bit more about affordability. So ADUs, like I mentioned, can also be a source of rentals that can be like a little bit lower market or even help house like family members, like people who are a little bit older and want to stay in their home. You can also look into things like deed restrictions. I heard people talking a little bit about sorry, I forgot the word for it, but organizations that would do like community land trusts. So something similar to that, or something that community land trusts do could be like a deed restriction based on income. So if someone wants to sell their house, they would have to sell it to someone with a certain income or with limited equity transfer built into the deed. And also if short-term rentals becomes more of an issue in this part of the county in Raymond, then you could also look into deed restrictions for short-term rentals. Okay, all right, and then I'll pass it off to South Bend.
All right, so based on that earlier HAPT table that we showed about the population projections, we're projecting that South Bend will only be taking about 3.98% or about 56 homes by 2044. So while it's going to be likely experiencing growth on the smaller scale of the spectrum in terms of Pacific County, there are still barriers to infill housing that could be addressed to promote more opportunities for such. So I've identified several barriers to infill housing opportunities in South Bend in doing my research. The first one being new multifamily housing is not allowed in the downtown commercial district in South Bend. So clearly a recommendation would be to amend the code to allow for that. Another barrier is that minimum lot sizes in South Bend are really large and they're very prohibitive for middle infill housing types. So for example, it's the minimum lot size in South Bend is 11,600 square feet for a duplex and 20,000 square feet for a multifamily housing. And that is about 1.5 to 2 times the size of Raymond's. So for example, Raymond was looking to make their minimum lot size for duplex 6,000 square feet, whereas it's 11,600 in South Bend. and they have 10,000 square feet minimum lot size for their multifamily housing, whereas it's 20,000 in South Bend. So adjusting that accordingly would be a beneficial method of addressing that barrier to infill housing in South Bend. Additionally, the maximum lot coverage of 65%, we've demonstrated that to be restrictive in a map I will show in just a moment. And similarly to Raymond, the sewer is not extended to many of the vacant lots that we've identified. And so extending that sewer would allow for more new development to be occurring. And there are some recommendations for grants that we will outline in our paper. And one of them, so Rachel mentioned the CHIP grants. There's also the USDA Rural Development Water and Waste Disposal Loan and Grant Program. So that's for rural areas with populations of 10,000 or less. So some of the municipalities in Pacific County would fall under that potentially. So I'm now going to go into some of the maps that I've made. The first map is I'm delineating the 8 vacant parcels that are in the downtown commercial district for South Bend. This is from the 144 vacant parcels that the previous LCY group identified for us. And so the key takeaway from this map, so those vacant downtown commercial parcels are in the light blue. The key takeaway is that they exist and they are not able to be developed on with middle infill housing at the moment. So they're a missed opportunity essentially right now. The next map, please. This is a parcel analysis broken up by area sizes into the sections of the minimum lot requirements in the current South Bend zoning code. So the first section is for the parcels with the area size up to 8,700 square feet. So that's below even what a single family home could house in South Bend. So there are 59 parcels that are too small for even a single family. And then the next category is 8,700 to 11,600. So that would be able to house single family homes. And there are 18 that could fit that. Then 11,600 till 19,999. Those are parcels that will be able to have a duplex. And we see that 38 could fit of these vacant parcels. And then the final category is the 20,000 plus. And so those are parcels that are eligible to house a multifamily housing unit in South Bend. So the key takeaway from this is that there are many parcels that are size-wise large enough to fit these MMI types. The next slide, please. And this map breaks down the largest housing option and how many units it holds per each of the vacant parcel breakdowns. So there are 4 parcels that can only fit 0 units, so they're less than that 8,700 square feet minimum lot size. 2 parcels could fit 1 to 3 units, 10 could fit 4 to 5 units, 74 could fit 6, and 54 could fit 7 through 13. So the key takeaway here is that there are a lot of vacant parcels in South Bend with the capacity for larger MMH types, so housing 6 through 13 units. And this next slide here breaks down those standard models which encapsulate those units. So in the 1 to 3 unit section, duplexes 1 through 3, triplexes 1 through 2, and townhouse 1 fits there. And those were the 2 parcels. So this slide, while it's a little complex, if you go back and forth between these slides, you can figure out what is able to fit in which vacant lot. All right, the next slide, please. This shows where duplexes could physically fit but are not allowed either due to zoning, so they're not allowed in the downtown commercial, or due to the physical size restriction, so they don't fit, or the fit isn't allowed due to the minimum lot size or lot coverage. So from this, we see that 69 vacant parcels could fit a duplex but are not allowed. So this demonstrates the restrictive quality of some of South Bend's zoning currently. And then the next slide is the same concept, but for multifamily housing. So from this, we find that current restrictive zoning is a barrier to multifamily housing as well in South Bend. And there are 97 parcels that could physically fit multifamily homes, but they're not allowed due to the minimum lot sizes in South Bend. All right, and this next slide shows the restrictive quality of each of the vacant parcels. So what is restricting them? So 69 of these parcels are restricted by their maximum lot coverage, and 75 are restricted by their physical dimensions. So from this, we see that maximum lot coverage is actually a very prohibitive factor of South Bend zoning code. And the next slide is a sewer map. So I've delineated all of the updated zoning for each parcel with their proximity to the sewer. So we see that 53 parcels are on the sewer, 40 are near the sewer, and 51 are far from the sewer. And so that 91 parcels that don't currently have sewer access but are vacant, that's a great opportunity for those sewer extension grants to then help make those parcels more viable for middle housing. All right, and then these next two maps are wetland analysis maps. So we take the wetland layer and we have figured out which of the vacant parcels in South Bend are affected by the wetlands. So we have there are 8 parcels that are affected by the wetland because they're within 25 feet, and 33 are within 300 feet of the wetland. And that's the minimum to the maximum buffers for a wetland in Washington. And since we don't know the exact categorization of each of the wetland types from 1 through 4, we did the minimum and the maximum buffer instead. And so from this, we see that only 41 of the 144 vacant parcels would be affected by the wetlands. So this is an important thing to keep in mind when thinking about infill housing, is these environmental constraints. And the next map is the same thing, but with the wetland types included here. All right, and the final 2 maps go together. These are the 25 parcels that I've identified out of the 144 that are able to be merged. So they share a boundary with an adjacent parcel. And so in this next slide, I have them merged here. And so these are parcels that could then, being merged, allow for more middle housing in this merged version, essentially. All right, and so my recommendations to address these barriers in South Bend, the first one being decreasing the minimum lot sizes, so looking to Raymond and the Washington Department of Commerce standard minimum lot sizes from that table. We also recommend that South Bend extend sewer, and we will recommend some grants to do so with. Increasing the maximum lot coverage is also another recommendation for South Bend, as we saw that was restrictive in one of the maps. Similar to Raymond, decreasing some of the front setbacks and other setbacks in South Bend would allow for more buildable parcel area and thus more middle housing types. Additionally, allowing new multifamily housing in the downtown commercial district, as I mentioned. An example of a city who has done so, made this change, is Sisters, Oregon. They've done the similar amendment. And a final recommendation would be to increase the minimum ADU size, which is currently at 500 feet, which is a very small ADU. So it could be extended up to 1,000 or 1,200 square feet, are large maximum ADU sizes that I've seen in different municipalities. And if it were 1,200 square feet, for example, as Eastham, Massachusetts does, that would allow it to be a dwelling unit for 2 people. So that would automatically double the ADU housing capacity in the town by doing so. All right, and finally, here are some additional future considerations that go hand in hand with this. So one thing is updating the GIS map for South Bend's new zoning. It was changed in 2017, but the actual GIS layers still have it with the previous zoning. So I georeferenced a TIFF image of the zoning map in order to do my analysis, but an actual layer in GIS of the new zoning would need to still be created. Additionally, a analysis could be done for these merged parcels that identified the 25. Also, a wetland analysis that is appropriate to each of the different categories of wetland type and buffer would be helpful to actually know, rather than a 25 to 300 foot buffer, to know the exact type for each wetland and how it affects the vacant parcels in South Bend. Additionally, there is a concept called form-based code, which some municipalities have started adapting. And it's a zoning regulation that prioritizes the physical form and design of buildings and public spaces over the land use. So it creates very cohesive, pleasing urban development, essentially. And a city that's successfully done this is Miami, Florida, through its Miami 21 zoning code. So I'm going to outline that in the report. And finally, one way to go about some of these zoning recommendations, incorporating them, is doing a floating or an overlay zone instead of just physically going in and amending zoning code itself for the entire zone. You can do an overlay or floating zone on top, which is a more flexible way to incorporate some different regulations. And I will now pass it off to Long Beach.
Okay. So I started with wanting to know just what everything was zoned. I have the vacant parcels from the previous group, and so I just made a map going, okay, what zone is it? Put a color on it, put it on a map, just to figure out what are my options. From this, I broke down all the zones, and I looked at what's the allowed housing type in that zone. We got some zones that don't allow it. We got some zones that allow a quadplex, a single family home, duplex and lower. And then hotels and motels, I think, counts as a housing type, because we have like housing types that are supporting like tourism. And so like I guess that counted as a home. And so my thought process behind that was, well, if it's a home over the weekend, you could turn it some of the units into like you could rent them out as like long time. And these parcels are these blue ones on the left, and they are zoned as shoreline resort restricted. And there's also live workspaces, which are in like the Old Town and Old Town West district, which are located on the right side. I do have Long Beach turned on its side, which was interesting because I couldn't really fit Long Beach vertically on a horizontal slide. And so I just plopped Long Beach on its side. So we are looking at Long Beach from the beach, if that makes sense. The ocean is the gray below us. This is comparing the parcel size, the length and widths, which were created from using Calculate Metrics, which is a tool in the mapping program to figure out just the size of the physical parcel. And then I compared those to the middle housing types that the Washington State Department of Commerce created. And so I just said, does it fit? Does the length meet the length of the parcel? Is it greater than the length of the housing type? And is the width greater? Just to see, like, yes or no. And so from this, we have some parcels that don't. There is no housing type based on that analysis that will fit in that parcel. We have some that can fit a duplex, a triplex, a sixplex, and then the 13 units from the courtyard housing. And usually if it meets a larger housing type, it will meet all the ones below it. This is just to see what can fit versus what allowed. What does the zoning say? And what did that previous map have to tell me? We have parcels that will fit larger than a duplex, but just aren't allowed to fit a duplex. We have ones that can fit larger than a live workspace, but are just not allowed. We have ones that can fit any housing type, multiple housing types that are not allowed. We have some that can fit quadplex or larger, but are zoned for just quadplex and lower. This is doing lot coverage. So it is taking the square area of the parcel and then timesing it on that zone's maximum lot coverage. This creates just the metaphorical maximum amount of space that can be covered on that parcel based on like buildings. So this map shows that like some can fit a quadplex, a sixplex, or the 13 units, just based on does the coverage amount have enough area to fit a housing type. Not does the length and width match to fit, just does the area number fit. This is a combination of the previous idea as well as the length and width, just to see a combination of both of them. If it met one of them, then what would it fit? And what was the highest capacity that a parcel could have? So a lot of them can have a duplex. That's fine. Well, how do I get the most bang for my area, the bang for my buck situation? So we have a lot that can fit a fourplex. A lot of them can fit a sixplex, and then a lot of them can fit the 13. So there's a high opportunity to fit larger housing units based on size alone. This is a map determining what's more restrictive for that parcel. Is the buildable area, like is the length and width constraints the problem, or is the maximum lot coverage of what you're allowed? And so we have some parcels that fall in between, and some of them are either the length and widths really just don't allow you to do things, and some of them the maximum lot coverage just don't allow you to do things. So that's what this is trying to visualize. I have also done a wetland analysis map using the same 25 and 300 foot. What's interesting is that if a parcel fell within 25 feet of a wetland, it is also falling within the 300 feet. There is none that just fall within 25 feet. And then we have some parcels that fall within 300 feet. And so if any part of the parcel crossed over into the wetland buffer, I just said, yep, it's in the buffer, and just marked it as such. And so it is colored as such. 19 of 66 of the previous group's Long Beach vacant parcels are within both the 25 and 300 foot buffers, when another 13 of them are within the 300 foot buffers. So that, just looking at that, we have almost half of our 66 parcels that are considered vacant to be within a wetland buffer zone. And so what can be done is finding the actual categories of the wetlands, because like we have this wetland designation, and that is from the Washington State wetland map that I found online, and just imported that data and made a map and visualized it. But I don't know what the category is, because they have their categories based on the buffers need to be had, and they just don't have that labeled as such. We also have some parcels that just aren't affected by wetland. And so those would be the best parcels to be putting housing on, or changing there's something with wetlands and like being able to move them or resituate them and keep that land. So that could be done on some of these parcels that are affected by that wetland. My recommendations for Long Beach are just to add larger housing types. Courtyard housing, which is the biggest one. In this case, this 3-story one can't fit because of the height constraints, but this larger housing types can fit within a lot of the parcels, but just aren't allowed based on zoning. We can increase the maximum lot coverage. We're sitting at 65 to 75 on most zones, which I think is good, but I think you could increase it like 5% more and just add a little bit more coverage, and therefore adding another unit, another housing type. That wetlands buffer study could be done to figure out what category the wetland falls under, and to then give the approximate and appropriate buffer length. My other idea was to add duplexes into single family residential, as well as the single family restricted, because they are currently not allowed. To allow triplexes, which within the 2-family residential and 2-family restricted zoning, as well as add 5plexes and 6plexes into the multifamily and multifamily restricted, because those are currently capped at quadplexes. Now I'm going to open the floor to any questions, if anybody has any, and I can go back to the appropriate slide if you wish.
I do have a question. In our current shoreline and recreational areas, long-term housing is not allowed, and Ariel will correct me on this because I always get these things a little wrong. But were those kinds of restrictions considered when you looked at your total housing availability?
I did see the shoreline ones. You're talking about like the shoreline 1, shoreline 2 zoning.
Yeah, and I don't know if Ariel's able to jump in and save me on this one, or David.
I'm here.
Thank you. Yeah, bail me out. You know what I'm talking about.
So S1 and S2, yeah, single family and two family. He was focused more on the S3, S3R, which is resort only, vacation rental only, not allowing for long-term housing.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying is that takes a bunch more of the possible housing you were showing off of the availability unless we make changes.
Correct.
So,
I have a question about Awako.
yes, Holly, go ahead.
Was there any consideration or review of parking requirements included?
Are you talking about the parking requirements in the R1 and R2 zones?
Yeah, I think that was mostly what was covered on your slides. But even if we were to look at second story apartments in commercial zones, one of our biggest challenges is locating parking for them. And is there any suggestions on how our code could be updated to reflect decreased parking requirements?
I will have to go back and take a look at the parking requirements. I did not consider that for this.
Okay, thanks.
I would also say that should be considered when talking about the ADUs. I know it's in the House bill, but a lot of these small lots that have homes on them have multiple people living there. Adding 2 more ADUs to a property of that size, 5,000, 6,000 square feet, is it going to be extremely demanding of that area? So I would just say that that's something you guys should really look at on those close neighborhood areas.
Yeah, and I got 2 pages worth of notes here. And I don't want to monopolize everything or be a Debbie Downer, but that was kind of my, there were a few things I'll just hit. Parking was one of them. And like a city of Long Beach, we don't have developed curbs, gutters in most places, so there isn't any real on-street parking. I think that could be developed with new ADUs and new structures. But we don't have, I don't want to knock Pacific Transit, they're doing everything they can, but we don't have a very good transit system set up. You know, we just don't have the population for it. They don't work 7 days a week now. They don't work after, I think, 7 o'clock at night. So, you know, people need cars still here. We're rural, we're not urban. And so I guess that was a question if you took that into account. You know, I was looking at what Rachel did on one of the slides. There was a building, I think it was 8,228 square feet on her lot. And what I was seeing is there's a building underneath it. And that one, A250, the one you were on. So if you look at that A250, there's already a building under there. And what happens in Pacific County a lot is the adjoining property, it says it's vacant, but it's actually owned by the person with the building, and that's part of their lot. They just own 2 lots. And so some of these that they're showing as a vacant are really not vacant. But it's good to have that inventory, there's no doubt. On Raymond, again with Rachel, she had the setbacks and they brought them down, I think, to 10 or 15, and she had square foot. I think you mean a frontage of 10 feet, not square feet, because that'd be like a 2x5.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's what I meant.
No, I'm just thinking this will come out eventually, and it was just something I wanted to make sure I was understanding, because boy, that was really small to me. And then Jennifer, the question I had is, you know, on yours, you were talking about more or less making everything a bedroom community in South Bend. And they have problems funding police, fire, parks, all things go with it because there's no commercial revenue to come through. So I'm guessing South Bend would probably feel that they would need the commercial. They're looking for that big thing to employ the people that are going to live there. And that's a problem that I see. And again, they're with transit as well. So that would be a thing. I didn't think Miami was a good comparison. You know, Miami's got an incredible commercial scene. I mean, we even know about Miami and Long Beach. And I don't know that those two mix as well. And then Cameron, the notes I had on yours for Long Beach was the area that you had west of the breakers. It's owned by the breakers, and this is something that we have with the property. Yeah, either one of those work. The blue big blob on the very left corner of that is when you have an oceanfront lot and you've built on it in the 70s or 80s. A lot of times people don't want to build in, sell in front of them because they have their ocean view or they don't want anything built on it. So some of these lots, even though they're big lots, you're not going to see them developed. I don't know how you could force that to happen. And one of them, these pictures you can kind of see downtown is Scooper's parking lot is a vacant lot that could have live workspaces. I agree they could, but the current owners probably will have no interest. But it's funny that the lot right next to it, right across the city now owns, and we've, Mayor Svensson and I have kind of talked about that is, hey, what if you did something commercial on the lower part, put your work stuff up above, might be a good thing for that property. And then you've mentioned the wetlands, so I don't need to go into those, but those are just a few things that I kind of jotted down when we were going through this. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. I think we need it.
And there's clearly going to be, just Dave, as you're pointing out, there's going to be, knowledge that you all carry individual to municipalities that are going to, that really reflect the nuances of this kind of work. Darian, I want to recognize your hand, and then Jeannie, you had your hand up. Oh, I'm sorry. Your thumbs up. Yes, Darian.
Hey, thanks, David, for bringing up the commercial comment for South Bend. This kind of got my mind going on this, and I'm just curious, and this is mostly a question for all of us that live here, or maybe people that might be, or if the students reviewed the current zoning on the commercial space. One thing that I've learned about Ilwaco that I think is really interesting, and I think Long Beach does it too, is in the commercial area, they will allow apartments up above, or like the commercial space has to be the front facing view, or it has to be front facing 100% and then 50% of the downstairs or the commercial space. It has to be at least 50% of the building. So I'm wondering if that could be something that South Bend, like a happy medium, for that zoning to say, hey, we still want to prioritize commercial space, so have that be the downstairs, and then the upstairs, you can do apartment dwellings or different things like that. I was curious, do they already have that in their zoning and for the commercial space to allow apartments in the upstairs, or like a mixed use of that commercial space? Because maybe that's an avenue that we could try to advocate for.
Yeah, not that I know of, but I will definitely do a deeper dive and review that for our final recommendations. I think that was a great point. Thank you.
Cool.
Sue, you have your hand up, and Jovan, you have your hand up.
Yeah, for me, I was just looking at our total numbers, and by the time we take out the restrictions of, like, for instance, we have a view property on a half an acre and we're probably not going to build out in front of us. And the resorts, I don't know that we have enough land left to meet the requirements. And that leaves us with a conundrum.
And that's a very good point, Sue, that was brought up early on, is that we, county plus municipalities, are going to have to wrestle with that overall number, that 1,400 of units that GMA is expecting us to plan for. We're going to have to sort that out. So it'll be an interesting game of poker, right? And so Sue, I believe you're raising the first ante, right? Saying no more room in Long Beach. Jovan, I want to recognize you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that from the work that was done on the Raymond end, sorry, I have a crappy internet connection, so I don't want to drop the call. For what you have evaluated for the Raymond recommendations, I do think I would love to see, and I'm sure it's probably in the report, but we also have kind of that parking requirement thing that has prevented a lot of development opportunities. So I wonder how that would impact the overall mapping of that. But overall, like, I just have to say, honestly, I'm super impressed. This is such workable information for us. And you guys have done just such an incredible job making it easy for me to grasp where the potential maneuvers are. So I just wanted to say that I personally am extremely impressed by this presentation and honored to have been able to be here to see this. I think it's great work, and I'm excited to see your final reports. But I would like to see some of the parking issues kind of come into that conversation. Just what best recommendations, or if there's other samples of how cities have dealt with that. I'd love to see something like that.
I'd like to also say great job on doing what I think Kelly and my primary goal was, and probably Darian's, which is to get some visual representations that can stimulate the conversation. And the work that you did, it may not be it may not be totally complete, it may not be totally accurate. That's okay. We have to have a starting place. And so one of the things that I think would be great is if we could also just have the maps, or if you could tell us what mapping software you used, because maybe we might want to play with them a little more. I'm really glad that people were able to understand what you were saying well enough to be able to ask great questions and start good conversation that has to happen on something that is going to be a struggle. Darian, you're next.
Hey, I just realized I'm late for my next meeting, but just real quickly, thank you guys very much. I love the recommendations because it really does help us with these conversations to see what ideas are workable and what ideas we can't use. I am curious, I noticed that in a couple of them, and this is just a question to the group, whoever knows, that 6,000 square feet was picked in a couple of our municipalities for minimum lot sizes. And I'm curious if there's a reasoning for that, if that was like, we know that 6,000 square feet is like the smallest that we could do based on restrictions, or if it was well, they did it and it's reasonable, so maybe we can go down to 6,000 as well. I thought that was interesting, the commonality between, I think, Raymond and Owaco.
I wanted to echo that comment and hoping that it shows up in the final report, right? In terms of the specific recommendations you're making regarding density and setbacks and so forth, to make it clear, are these indeed common or commonly being adopted or future wise being projected as to the norm that should be? I'm sorry, I cut somebody off on that.
That's just me. I can give some insight to at least Raymond's side of it. The lot size recommendations for zoning were made based on recommendations from the consultancy that we use to evaluate our comprehensive plan update. And now that we're going into the environmental plan update, there was already conversation about, and I think Rebecca Chafee had presented it at some point, about like, do we have to have this size of a lot for our set? Can we go smaller? Can we go larger? Those kind of conversations. But I believe it was just on the recommendation of our consultancy. We spent about 5 hours going over that that programming, and his big thing was like, this would give you density without and meet the minimum requirements. But obviously, based on your recommendations and some of the things that you guys highlighted, it's obviously a little bit restrictive. So I definitely think it's something that is a workable conversation to have at our city level. We're very fortunate to have a very copacetic environment, and we're all looking to react as well as we can for the challenges ahead. So yeah, but that's some insight on it, if that makes any sense.
What I'm hearing is multiple people saying, what are the premises? How are we making this decision on lot size, or what is guiding our thoughts? And like, what is the reasoning as to choosing A over B? And David has his hand up, so maybe he knows.
Yeah, Long Beach was predominantly platted at 5,000 square foot lots. I bet 50 50 to 70% of our lots are 5,000 square feet. And when we did the zoning in 1991, we made the minimum 6,000 square feet, except for commercial, which we actually dropped, I think, to 2,500 square feet downtown to allow for more smaller shops to have variety. But the 6,000 square foot on the housing was, they didn't want small houses. They wanted big McMansions before they were a thing. You know, we wanted to have a high value oceanfront place that brought taxes in to help support the city. And that's why we did it. But I can see now there's an issue.
Gareth, any wrap-up comments you want to make on behalf of the group and the project?
Sorry, I couldn't get my mute button up there. No, I think all the comments and the questions, and I've got a couple pages of notes. I think, again, you know, I've told this group, you know, if they were a consultant team hired, this would not be a 3-month project. This would be, you know, maybe a year-long project. But I feel like they've done an amazing job given the amount of time they've had and the resources to work with. And Sue, I think you mentioned it. I think, you know, this work raises a lot of questions and starts the discussion on multiple different levels about how to increase housing stock. You know, there's multiple reasons or ways to approach these things, and there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to every community or every neighborhood within a community. So this is really, you know, just the beginning. And you know, Kelly, I think you said it. There's a lot of work that needs to be followed up as these House bills and laws get put into place. And then you've got the mandated goals that everybody's got to meet. Obviously, those are goals, and the state's going to want and push jurisdictions as much as they can to get to those goals. But I think this is, you know, a very good start, and they've done a fantastic job. So.
Kudos to everyone here, and best wishes for, you know, more exciting graduation parties than what Rachel had. Although it sounds like, you know, the zip line was a big win. You know, that's for sure.
Oh yeah.
I just want to say thank you. I know Ariel is probably going, I know all this stuff already. And for me and possibly for our council members, I think it's enlightening to get it really spelled out clearly. And the more we understand the problem, the more we can make decisions.
We will eagerly await the final report, as well as, again, as Sue mentioned, access to all of your ArcGIS files. It's very important that when you graduate, the data doesn't go poof, right? So let's make sure that that's captured somewhere. And Gareth, perhaps that's a great way in which you at least could make sure it's in a central repository before it's turned over to us.
Yeah, no, we will figure out a way to you know, package everything up and hand it over to you guys so that this work, like you said, doesn't just go poof, and it is, you know, begins and is the foundation for more work that needs to happen.
Thanks everyone for participating. You know, this will make this recording available to everyone, and particularly at you know, some of the broader audiences that are going to be eager to review the report and to see your recommendations. Congratulations all.
Thanks, everybody. You did a great job.
Thank
you again for this